Hey guys, I'm Marissa and welcome back to my channel. I am a first-time mom and I have a 1-month-old son right now. His name is Peter. He is super sweet. And not only is the journey to motherhood like crazy, but what makes it even crazier is giving birth in the middle of a global health pandemic. So today I just wanted to sit down and share with you what it was like being pregnant and also giving birth during COVID, because I know that there are still a lot of expecting moms out there who are about to have a baby during this crazy uncertain time. So I just wanted to sit down and share my experience. But before we get into it, if you want to, you can totally subscribe to my channel. I'm sharing a lot of my motherhood journey here on YouTube in vlogs and sit down videos, so subscribe so that you won't miss a new video. Okay, so I want to take this back to when COVID actually became a thing. So I live in Portland, Oregon, and I know that the first outbreak in the United States, like the first epicenter that they were looking at, was becoming like right near Seattle, Washington, which is really close to Portland, Oregon. And that in itself was a little bit like frightening, and that was like at the end of February. And I remember the day that we got our very first case in Oregon, and it was still one of the first few cases in the entire United States. There was a case near Portland, Oregon, and that was February 28th. So at that time, I was just coming into my third trimester. I think I was just hitting like 28 weeks. So at this point in my pregnancy, since I had hit my third trimester, before that I was going to the doctor once a month, but then once I hit my third trimester, I was then going every other week. So then I had my doctor's appointment for like the next time after the COVID thing had happened, and my doctor's office like gave me like a handout like talking about it, and even it said like, don't wear a mask, that makes things worse, you know, we're treating this like cold and flu season, so just wash your hands and don't touch elevator buttons or door handles, you know, like just treat it like cold and flu season. And it was totally like not a big deal. And that appointment was like the very first week of March. Like it was just a few days after we had like the first case in Oregon. And then I had an appointment 2 weeks later, and that's when things got real. And for us in Oregon, 2 weeks after that was when things started like completely shutting down. That's when schools were getting canceled and sending kids home. And I went to my doctor's appointment then, and at that point it was being treated very seriously, and I don't think they were all wearing masks at that point, but it was just like, oh, let's avoid big crowds and things like that, because churches and things were getting shut down, like big crowds. So it was becoming more serious. So obviously being pregnant, like one of the things that you do is have baby showers, and I had 3 of them scheduled, and they were all going to be in the month of April. And so when I went to that appointment in mid-March, when things were starting to get more serious at like the doctor's office, and also just like with the status of things closing, I remember asking my doctor like what she thought about doing these baby showers, and she was like, yeah, you're probably not gonna be able to do those. So at that point, we unfortunately had to make the decision to cancel our April baby showers, which was a huge bummer. And being so pregnant and emotional, like I was just really upset about it, quite honestly. Like you just think of that to be like, that's what you do as a first-time mom. You have baby showers, and it wasn't like the gifts aspect of it, but it was just more of like wanting to be able to celebrate this with friends and family, and then knowing that like we couldn't do that was just a bummer. And also the fact that we had 3 of them, and then we couldn't do any of them. So I was definitely upset about the baby showers being canceled. And I know that like during that time, a lot of people thought that I was being ridiculous for being like upset that they were canceled, but like, again, I was super pregnant, and that's just one of the things that you expected would happen when you're a mom, and I didn't get to experience that, so that was just a bummer. So by the next appointment that I had, it was like the first week of April, and that's when things were like completely serious, and it had basically been serious from like the appointment that I had 2 weeks earlier, but at this point it was now like everyone was wearing masks in all of the appointments. And then I was also told that my husband wasn't able to join me at doctor's appointments anymore. I was super grateful that Jacob actually got to go with me to almost every doctor's appointment that I had up until now. Like, he would take time off work to go with me to these appointments, which was huge. And obviously he like wanted to keep going to these other appointments, but at this point they were trying to limit their exposure at the doctor's office, which I get. So we were told that Jacob wasn't going to be able to join me for any more appointments. Also, at this point, I forgot to mention, but Jacob and I started working from home in mid-March. Our offices like shut down, and so we were like fully remote during this time as well. So we were both just staying at home, working from home, not going anywhere, except I would go to my doctor's appointments for the remainder of my pregnancy. The good news is that my OB's office was not like at a hospital or anything. It was at like a separate clinic. And so she actually graciously allowed partners to come for ultrasounds, which was really nice. So Jacob was allowed to come with me to my last ultrasound that I had scheduled, which was at 37 weeks. So all my other appointments I had to go by myself, but at 37 weeks, Jacob got to come with me. And actually at that ultrasound appointment, we found out that my fluid level was really low. And so at that point, they actually wanted to have an ultrasound for me every week up until I gave birth. So Jacob actually got to come with me for a couple more appointments because of having low fluid and having to have more ultrasound appointments. So all during this time, like leading up to labor and delivery, I was just feeling really anxious and fearful of what was going on. Obviously, things just changed so quickly, and everything that I imagined like the pregnancy experience to be was just like all the plans were thrown out the window, and I had no clue what actual labor was going to look like. So I learned that our hospital was only going to allow one person to be with you at the hospital, and there was going to be no visitors. You could just have one like partner there, and that was a bummer that I wasn't going to be able to like have my mom, but I was grateful to have Jacob there. And I know like during this whole time I was then hearing of other hospitals like in New York City and also hospitals like in other parts of the world that were no longer allowing a birth partner to be there, which freaked me out. Like, to go through all of that by myself just seemed so traumatizing, and I definitely shed some fearful tears about it during that time as I was anticipating going into labor. So one of the things that I actually did do was call my hospital during these like the last couple weeks leading up to delivery to understand what their regulations were at that time, because there were a lot of differences and things were changing so quickly, and I've heard of people having experienced this, one way and then having an experience a different way. I was told at one of my appointments, I think when I was maybe like 36 weeks, I was told that the hospital was only going to allow one birth partner, and also that I would be required to wear a mask during labor and delivery, which was so upsetting to me to even think of. Like, I know that going through labor and delivery is like running a marathon, and I don't know how you were at all supposed to do that with wearing a mask. I also heard that they were going to be checking me for COVID once I arrived to the hospital, and there were a lot of things going around of like what would happen if I tested positive. They'd want to separate me from baby, and like I really didn't want that to happen either. So those were some of my fears, and so I was able to call the hospital and totally understand what their regulations were, so that I could be prepared for when I'd walk into the hospital, like knowing a little bit more of what to expect during that time, which I'm so grateful that I did call. Again, things were changing so quickly, but at the time that I was able to deliver, which was May 21st, 2020, I found out from my hospital that I would be tested for COVID, but my husband Jacob could still be there with me, and also I was not going to be required to wear a mask during labor and delivery, which was like a huge praise. So this was all obviously while I was still pregnant and like leading up to the weeks before delivery, but also during this time, basically my entire third trimester of pregnancy, there were other things that just became like disappointments of things that I didn't get to experience, especially things that you think you're going to do as a first-time mom. Like I already mentioned, like the baby showers. We had to cancel all of our baby showers. We did get to do one virtual baby shower with my family over Facebook, which was really fun, and I'm grateful that we did that. I know that sometimes I can become really like, woe is me, and think like, well, if I can't do it to this extent, like why even do it at all? And I'm glad that we did do the virtual baby shower. I was really debating not doing it just because I was just like, wanted to be like, screw it, like what was me. But it was good that we like did get to celebrate in that way. The other thing that I was bummed that we didn't get to do was maternity photos, and that's something that you normally get to experience. And that too, I was just like, well, whatever, we're just not going to do anything. And we actually ended up taking a few of them ourselves here at home, so I'll put a couple here, but they ended up turning out not too bad. So they were just like at home maternity photos that we did on our own. I would have loved to have like professional photos taken, and that just like wasn't something that we got to experience. The other thing that we didn't get to do was a baby moon. So we were planning to just do something more like local at the end of March for our little baby moon, and ended up that it got canceled because of everything that was happening. So it was just a lot of disappointments, and they were all so quickly, like it all just like changed like that, and they were all so close together that it was just like a really disappointing time, I guess. And especially just things that you think you're gonna do, and like this experience that you anticipate as a first-time mom, and just having that like taken away super quickly, obviously for important reasons, but still it was just something that I had to work through. So that was basically my entire third trimester, being pregnant during the pandemic. The other thing that I'll note is that once everything was happening, like mid-March, we didn't go anywhere. Like once our work was shut down and everything, we did not go to any restaurants. Those ended up closing as well, but all of our grocery shopping we did through like order pickup. We didn't go to Costco at all. We became like literal hermits. And also we avoided being in contact with literally anyone. Like I didn't get to hug my family for months, and even though they live like super close to us, like they'd come over and we'd do like a social distant thing like in the driveway to say hi, but that was about it. And that was super hard as well. And it was just kind of sad of like my family couldn't feel like my baby kick in my belly or anything like that because we had to like stay separate. So it was just a really isolating, difficult time, as I know a lot of people have experienced. But I feel like being pregnant and like wanting to share this time with other people, especially just with it being during the early unknown stages of the pandemic, we just really isolated ourselves from other people because we didn't want to get sick, obviously. So it was just, yeah, it was really hard not being able to have those experiences with friends or family, just even getting to like hug our loved ones, you know, during that time. Okay, so now to talk about our actual hospital experience dealing with COVID. So the hospital that I went to isn't a huge hospital in Portland, so that was kind of something that I was grateful for, because I was a little more hopeful that there would be like a ton of COVID cases at my hospital. So the way that it worked was, I know that typically in non-pandemic times, you go to the labor and delivery wing when it's during the day and you have to go in for delivery, but in the middle of the night you have to go to like the main entrance of the hospital, and then they take you to labor and delivery. So because of COVID, that was not the case for us. We actually ended up at the hospital at 2 a.m. because my water broke, and we got to go straight through the labor and delivery wing. So they just have that completely sectioned off. So we walk into labor and delivery and they have it all like locked down, so you have to like pick up a phone and like say that you're here. And so I call in to say that like we're here, and then the nurses opened up the doors, and a nurse met us at the front entrance with a thermometer to scan our foreheads, and they also asked if we were experiencing any COVID symptoms, which we were not. So at that time they also gave Jacob a mask, and they told him that he had to wear the mask anytime he wasn't in the room, but I was told I didn't need to wear a mask at all. They didn't give me one at all. So the way that my hospital worked was the room that you were in for labor and delivery was also the same one for recovery. Like you just stayed in the same room the whole time. So they took us back to that room, even for triage and everything like that. So they walked us back to the room, and it wasn't far from the entrance that we walked in. So Jacob wore his mask for maybe like walking 50 feet, but we got into the room and then Jacob could take off his mask. And basically they didn't want us leaving the room for anything anyway. So we weren't allowed to go like walk the halls or do anything. We just had to stay in our room the entire time. So as soon as I went through like triage and they checked me and they were like, yep, you're in labor, like we're gonna keep you, and I was admitted to the hospital, they then came in and did the COVID test for me. Because I came in for spontaneous labor, they had to do like the quick test one. And honestly, it wasn't bad at all. I know there are a ton of different tests out there, but this one, they had to like shove a little Q-tip up my nose, but it barely went up my nose. Like it probably went up to like here in my nose. Like I know everyone talks about horror stories of it like going up to their brain basically, but for the one that I took at least, that was not the case. So they swabbed the inside of my nose and then they sent it off to a lab. And then I got the results maybe like 6 hours later or something like that, that came back that it was negative, which I expected because I literally hadn't gone anywhere in 3 months. So I was tested for COVID. My husband was not. So all of the hospital staff that we encountered were all wearing masks, obviously, and so they would come into our room wearing masks, and I was just super grateful that Jacob didn't even have to wear a mask as we were just like hanging out in the room. So another thing that was a little bit different for our pandemic experience was that, like I said, we weren't allowed to leave the room, which meant that we also couldn't leave the hospital. Like Jacob couldn't leave to go get food or go anywhere else. So they had actually given him like certificates for the hospital cafeteria, but the hospital cafeteria is also closed. So the way that it worked was basically room service for myself and Jacob, which I know they don't normally do for like your spouse, like they would have to go get their own food, but because of the pandemic, they just allowed us both to order like their room service. So we'd order whatever food we wanted. Jacob had a special voucher, and so when they would drop off the food, he would just hand in one of his food vouchers, and that's how he was able to get food. The other thing that we did was pack a lot of snacks because we didn't know exactly what that food situation would look like. So we did have a lot of snacks with us, and we did eat some of those when we were in the hospital as well. Another thing that I was worried about going into labor was thinking that they wanted everyone out of the hospital at 24 hours after delivery, which is something that they do like allow you to do. But as a first-time mom, I was just really scared because I wanted to make sure that like everything was good and that I like knew what I was doing a little bit before I was released. So I was actually released 48 hours after delivery, and a lot of that was also because our son had jaundice and weight loss, and so they just wanted to keep an eye on him for a little bit longer. But so we were there a full 48 hours afterward. We weren't like kicked out of the hospital early or anything like that. And then obviously, like I said, Jacob was the only person who was allowed to be there with me, and we were not allowed to have any visitors. So no one got to come see us at the hospital or anything like that. Maybe for a second kid we'll get to have that like just classic experience, but it was definitely not something that you could do during COVID, which is totally understandable. And the thing that I will say though is that all of the staff that we encountered were so kind and gracious. I had like the best nurses for labor and delivery, and it was a bummer that like we couldn't have someone else there to like take pictures, you know, during this time or anything like that, but the nurses even like just took my phone and took pictures for us. Like I have pictures of like after Peter was born and he's like laying on my chest and Jacob and I are like looking at each other, and somehow she just like took my phone and like took all these pictures for us, which that was really special that we still get to have those memories in that way. So I feel like the nurses and doctors have just gone like above and beyond during this time to make people still feel cared for and feel at ease during this really scary time. So nurses are awesome, and we definitely felt loved and cared for while we were in the hospital. And obviously this was my experience at my hospital. I know that things are different at like every other hospital, so it can definitely be different. This is just the regulations that my hospital had in place at the end of May. The other thing that was hard and definitely a disappointment is just trying to figure out like life with a newborn in the middle of a pandemic, trying to figure out who we want to have meet him. So at this point, he's now a month old, and we've only had my mom and stepdad and sister, and then Jacob's mom and dad meet him because they've been really good about like they were quarantined and social distancing and all of that kind of stuff. So no one else has held him, which makes me so sad that there's a lot of other family members who haven't gotten to meet him yet because of that. But I also know that my job right now is just to protect my son, and so I'm going to protect him and care for him in that way, and I hope that soon people will be able to meet him. But that was definitely another huge disappointment that I was really struggling through towards the end of my pregnancy, of knowing that people weren't going to get to meet him soon. The other thing that we didn't get to do that I know a lot of other people will experience is getting like a meal train, setting up a meal train for you, and like people bringing you food and also coming over to like meet your baby. So the way that this was done for us is someone from our church still wanted to set one up for us, which is so sweet. And so they made it a virtual meal train. So people just sent us e-gift cards. And that way we were able to order like Grubhub or like Uber Eats and like have food just delivered to our house, which was nice. And so no one came over to meet our baby, which honestly, during the first month of having a baby, I was topless for most of the day. And those first couple weeks, I definitely had like the baby blues, and I felt like I just cried all the time. And I literally couldn't imagine having people come over to like hold my baby in the midst of all of that. So I will say that even though it sucked that we didn't get to experience that, I honestly couldn't imagine having visitors that early on anyway, at this point, now that I've lived through it. So all in all, having a baby in the midst of a pandemic was totally not what I expected. Being a first-time mom and getting to experience like these fun things, and also having to just like live during this really scary, uncertain time, bring a baby into the world during this uncertain time, like it was definitely not what I expected, but we're doing okay, and we made it through like the pregnancy and the delivery, and now we're just at this new stage of living through the pandemic, of trying to figure out how we navigate it with a newborn, and really just trying to take care of him and his immune system, obviously, and we don't want him to catch anything at all. So I feel like we've still been hermits, and it's crazy that it's now like the end of June, like early July, like we're halfway through the year, and I feel like I've only lived 2 months of the year. Like that's what it's been. And I know that a lot of people have been experiencing that as well, but that was kind of my experience of being pregnant, having labor and delivery, and bringing home a newborn, all in the middle of a global health pandemic. Like the main thing was we wanted to have a baby, we wanted to have a healthy baby, and all of the things that I missed out on, all of the craziness that was happening, like none of it mattered when it just came down to like the point of all of this is for us to just have a baby. And so I just had to keep reminding myself that that was truly the end goal, and all of these other things like baby showers and photos and trips, like none of that mattered in the midst of just like having a baby. So for all of you moms out there who are looking to give birth in the middle of this, I know that it's stressful. I know that there's a lot of things that you are probably mourning and a lot of disappointments during this season, but I also want to let you know the main point of this is that you are having a baby, and that's something that is so great and something to be celebrated, and nothing else matters in comparison to that. So I hope that that's a little bit of an encouragement to you, and also just wanted to document this crazy experience that I've had, because who would have thought that I would have been giving birth during this like insane time in history. So that's my little pandemic story time. So if you enjoyed it, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in that next one. Bye.
Say something that will make my day, 'cause these memories of